Well, hey there. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If we've never met before, my name is Jean-Michel, and I have the privilege of leading Collective Church with my wife, Jenna. And our church believes in relationships, good, godly relationships. In fact, we believe that relationships they need to be healthy in order for us to have an impact on the world around us. It even has an impact on our walk with God, because if the relationships in our lives are unhealthy, that affects the way we see God, the way we interact with God, and how close we can be to Him. And so we're very committed to that. We're going to be talking today about the idea of insecurity and how difficult that makes relationships. And so we're going to dive into the Word. We're going to look at what the Bible says about insecurity, and we're just going to talk about it. And so you're welcome to interact, post in the comments below. We'd love to have a conversation with you as we go about these videos. So let's jump in. So the first thing we want to say is that relationships are intentional. If you want healthy relationships, if I want healthy relationships in my life, I have to be intentional about it. It doesn't happen by itself. And the reality is everybody is human. Whether you're a Christian, whether you've been serving God for a long time, whether you don't even really know about this whole church thing, the reality is that we are not perfect people. We are actually broken people in many ways. And we have to be intentional about learning what healthy relationships look like and where we can grow in that. I believe that's a godly thing. It's a good thing, and it's going to bring light and life to the people in our lives. An easy way to kind of see if a relationship in your life is healthy or not, it comes down to these three things, right? Three things that we need to honor in order for a relationship to be healthy. The first thing that we need to honor, or rather the first person that we need to honor in our relationships, is God. That's the starting point, right? We need to understand that we have to honor God with our relationships, the way we treat others, even the way we treat ourselves. We need to honor God through all of that. We need to know what His Word says. We need to have relationships that God can honor. In order to bring glory to His name, we have to honor God first. The second thing is that we need to honor others. If our relationships are going to be healthy, we need to learn how to serve others, how to care for others, how to make the relationship not just about me, but about you and what you need. And if we are honoring God and we're honoring others, we're on the right track towards something that's healthy. The third thing that we need to honor is ourselves. And we forget this one a lot, especially as Christians. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but we've grown up hearing this idea of serving others and being about others so much that sometimes we blur the lines as to what is honoring others and what is actually forgetting about ourselves. It doesn't honor God to forget yourself. Sometimes we think that it's arrogant or maybe self-centered to think about ourselves. But the reality is, if we don't take care of ourselves, we will end up hurting others around us. And so these are the three things that we need to honor in order for a relationship to be healthy. We've got to honor God, we've got to honor others, and we've got to honor ourselves. When all three of these things come together, we have godly relationships, we have other-centric relationships, and we are also taking care of our own needs, our relationships will be healthier. And this is where we need to jump into the idea of insecurity. You see, insecurity murders relationships. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship, whether that's a romantic relationship or with a friend or with a work colleague maybe, where they are very deeply insecure. It ends up bringing toxicity into relationships all over the place, where people mistreat you or they require more of you than you're willing to give, push your boundaries. There's all kinds of things that happen. But if you've ever been in any kind of insecure relationship, you can see that it becomes very damaging very quickly. And I ask myself the question, why? Why do we have these insecurities? Where do they come from? Now, obviously, insecurities come from a variety of places. There can be trauma in your past. There can be bad experiences. There's all kinds of things that give us insecurities. But the one that I want to look at today is comparison. And we all get this, right? We live in a culture of comparison. And that's also not new. That's something that's been around forever, basically. But especially in a world that's full of social media and the ability to put forth an image of yourself that's not necessarily true to reality. In that kind of world, comparison is killer. It will kill you because you're never going to fully match up to all the people around you. You'll look and you'll compare and you'll never quite be as good as someone else at whatever. I think about mothers who are comparing themselves to other mothers. Or maybe you're a business leader, a CEO, and you're comparing your company to other companies. Or maybe you're a minister, even a pastor, and you're comparing yourself to other churches and other ministers, and you just don't seem to match up. Man, this culture of comparison, it's super dark and it's not a good idea. We can see an example of this in the book of Genesis, right? So we're going to bring the Bible into it for a moment, and you can find these scriptures in Genesis chapter 16. You can go and read it for yourself, but I want to just lay out the story for you. And maybe we're going to dig into this idea of insecurity a little bit deeper, and it's going to help us a little bit. In Genesis chapter 16, we find the story of Abram and Sarai, right? These are big figures in the Bible. Abram becomes Abraham and Sarai becomes Sarah. And these are big figures that if you haven't heard about, you'll get to know a lot in your journey with God. But these two had a problem. They were married, they had been married for a long time, and it would seem that they had a generally good relationship, but they had a problem. The problem was that they couldn't have children. And so they're looking around at the people around them. Were looking maybe even at family, at friends. They're looking at the people in their community having kids. Yet they are people of power. These were wealthy people. These were people of influence. Yet they couldn't have children of their own. And it weighed on them. Especially it weighed on Sarai. Sarai struggled with this. She wanted to have children, but she couldn't. And because of that, an insecurity began to develop. And here's what plays out in the story. It's almost like a soap opera. Sarai says to her husband, Abram, I have this person who helps me. Her name is Hagar. And you and we can't have kids. So what you need to do is take her, sleep with her, and have a child with her. That will be our child, and we can have a family through her. Man, when I think about this, I'm like, especially with our modern eyes, we can see this is not a good plan. This is a bad plan. But Abram goes along with this idea, and he sleeps with Hagar, and Hagar falls pregnant. And this is one thing we need to see. Insecurity wants it both ways. I'm going to explain what that means, but I need you to see this. Insecurity wants it both ways. The first thing that Sarai sees, she wants a child. And so she comes up with a plan. If I can't have a child, then my husband can have a child through someone else, and that can be my child. But what you see happen after this is a complete disaster in the relationship between Sarai and her helper Hagar. The insecurity that she has about not having a child doesn't get alleviated when the child comes. It just gets worse. I don't know if you've ever had that experience in your life where you try and make a way for your insecurity to be kind of appeased, and it actually gets worse. That's what happened in the story. She ends up hating Hagar because she thinks that Abram is favoring Hagar and this child, and it's a complete disaster, as you can imagine. It ends up with Hagar and her child Ishmael being put out from the family. And God makes a covenant with Hagar and her child Ishmael to take care of them, and he does. He takes care of them. But it's just a perfect picture of how insecurity causes us to say and do things that seem like a good idea at the time, but actually it's a terrible idea and it just hurts the people around us. That's exactly what happened here. And I think you and I, we can look at the relationships in our lives and the things that have happened in the past, and we can totally see the same thing happening, where we actually acted out of fear and insecurity. We made decisions that seemed good at the time out of insecurity, and it ended up hurting us and the people around us. The interesting part about our insecurities, and this is something, especially if you're struggling in this area, I need you to hear this, that our insecurities are oftentimes our greatest strengths. It's crazy to think, but God's purpose and His plan is often wrapped up in the parts of our lives we think are not good enough. You know, what happens in Sarai's life is there's this whole process where God changes their names from Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah. That's a whole deep thing that we'll talk about sometime. But what happens after that is God promises them that they will have a child. And it comes to pass that when they trust and rely in God in time, in God's due season, the child Isaac is born to them, not through someone else, not in some other way, but in a healthy, good, and beautiful way for them. And this becomes their greatest strength. It is through the lineage of Isaac, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that the whole story of the Bible unfolds. And the reality is, Sarah just needed to wait for God's time. I know that you are struggling with insecurity. I know that it's not easy. I know that it's difficult. But the reality is God has a perfect time for you. And sometimes we just need to wait. Sometimes we're trying to make things happen, but actually we need to wait for God to make it happen. Sarah had a promise. You will have a family. And it wasn't happening. In the same way, we compare ourselves to other people and we're waiting for the thing to happen. Sometimes we even have a promise from God like it's going to happen, but we're looking at it happening for other people, and the insecurities in us are just getting bigger and bigger. Like, I'm not good enough. I don't match up to those around us, and we're trying to make it happen ourselves. But that insecurity is only going to lead to darkness. If we will choose to wait for God's time, that changes everything. Our insecurities are often our greatest strengths if we will place them in God's hands and let Him work it out in due season. You see, insecurity is rooted in I'm not good enough. And what it does is it places our eyes on the weakness. It places our eyes on ourselves instead of on God. You see, God knows who you are. He knows who He made you to be, and He wants to bring that to pass. But we have to put our eyes on Him above our circumstances. And this is what I want to leave you with today. If you're struggling with insecurity, or you know someone who's struggling with insecurity, we need to be led back to Christ and who He says we are. You see, Jesus, He is full of strength and full of life. And He says that He will take our burdens and He will place His burden on us. His yoke, His burden, which is light and easy. It's not difficult. What He's trying to say there is that He wants to take those things on your shoulders, the burdens, the ways you don't match up. He wants to take them from your shoulders and replace it with peace, to remind you He's the one that works you all things for good, works your life towards where He planned and purposed. And we can just simply rest and rely on Him. If you're struggling with insecurities, comparing yourselves to others and just seeing it not working out, today, will you just rest and receive that even though you're not the same as everybody else, you are still good enough. I know that one sentence isn't enough, but you need to hear those words and let God minister them to you. Our insecurities come from the fact that we think we're not good enough. But God says you are good enough. And so today I want to lead you back to Christ. Christ says He does the work. He's the one that's going to bring it to pass. And even though you might need change and you might need growth, it's okay. He's going to do it in you. I want you to lead your friends and family in the same way. Lead them back to Christ. Remind them that they're good enough. Even though they're not perfect, they are good enough. That way we can start to remove some of the insecurities in our lives that bring damage and harm to our relationships, and actually see God restore them back to a healthy space. I'm praying that for you and for me, and I know that God is going to do great things. So if you received that today, and if that's blessed you in any way, will you leave a like or a comment on this video? Maybe even subscribe to our channel. You're welcome also to join us for a service where every Sunday, 9 a.m., you can find the details on our website. We're in the Waterfall area in Johannesburg. We would love to see you. And we just want to say thank you for watching this video, especially all the way through to the end. And we're praying, we're trusting God for great things in your life. We'll see you again soon.